Hello, my name is Dr. Nick Bowman. I'm an associate professor in the College of Media and Communication at Texas Tech University and a former chair of ICA Game Studies. And along with Nat Poor and Mia Consalvo and Robbie Rattan and Vivian Chin, I've been asked to speak a little bit about some of the complications and opportunities associated with situating your scholarship within the larger realm of game studies literature. Now, most of my colleagues have already covered some specifics. So, for example, Nat Poor talked about conferences, and Robbie and Vivian talked a bit about some of the many different journals, and they've already provided some resources for that. And Mia Consalvo has talked about ways in which you might be able to answer some emerging questions in game studies. So I thought I might offer a few more tips at the very top level to think about as you emerge through and grow your game studies research. Understand that as a blue sky, this is really meant to be more of a dialogue than it is to be a prescriptive lecture. So please interact with our videos, make comments, post. You can message us directly. My Twitter information is here, as is ICA Game Studies. A big one is focus. I think where a lot of game studies papers tend to get confused or have a hard time finding a home is that oftentimes it's difficult to tell if the manuscript is about games as texts or gamers as people or the processes of gameplay. And I might suggest that the different focus of those papers is going to have a very different audience and likely different implications for where you're going to publish your work and where your work might apply, for example, for grant funding or for public service type works. So make sure the focus of your manuscript is very clear from the start. We know you're studying something about a video game, but to make sure we know if it's about the text, the people, and the processes. 2 points about venues. One of those is going to be reach out to journals. I've been an editor myself a couple of times now, and I've always liked it when people have emailed the journal to ask a very quick question about fit. Sometimes it's easier for me to read an abstract and give some early feedback to a scholar as to whether or not our journal would accept this work. The worst case scenario is a journal may not respond to you, and the best case scenario is you might get to know the editor's focus a little well, keeping in mind that journal titles don't often mean as much as the editor's focus or the editorial board's focus for that journal. And even going through previous publications may not give you a lot of insight because editors may roll over after a couple of years. Another point about venues is don't concern yourself too much if the word games is focal to the event or the publication. In fact, up on the screen right now, you're going to see the Technology Mind and Society Conference sponsored by the American Psychological Association. If you simply read that, you may not see anything about games. And yet, if you submit to that conference, which I've done a couple of years now, there's a very rich group of practitioners and psychologists and designers all looking at the processes of games as well as gamers and even some of the games as texts. In terms of research practices and scholarship practices, I would urge you very strongly to consider sharing your study materials and your study data even. A lot of us who do gaming work have really complicated and interesting stimulus materials or experimental designs or code books for how we understand how to quantify and qualify an interactive text. Sharing that material in your publications and your presentations goes a really long way in helping readers understand the sophistication involved in a lot of game studies scholarship. And finally, and Mia talked about this as well, think about the zeitgeist. Gaming is mundane, and at the same time, that's what makes it increasingly central to our lived experiences. So you really want to think long and you want to think deep about where games are mattering in all spaces of our lived experiences. So the QR code on screen is going to take you to the text of our blue sky, which might contextualize a lot of our own experiences. The same with the bit.ly link. Let's keep this conversation going. I've got to run like Sonic, and I'll see you online.